What's up, YouTube? Luke here with the Iron Grind, and today, on the morning of the Super Bowl of bodybuilding, I'm coming at y'all with my top 7 predictions list. Top 7, I know, sounds like a weird number. It was going to be top 6, but then Hadi Choopan threw his hat in the ring for, at the last minute. And I don't really care much about the next 3 to do a top 10 list. So I'm doing top 7. And I waited this long to be able to account for all of the variables, see how everybody's faces look, see how everybody's acting, who might be in condition, who might be out of condition, who's actually in the contest, which turned out to be a really good idea because I saw Tominator waited what he thought was a long time until 1 week out to do his predictions list, only to find the next day that Nathan Diasha had to plead guilty for steroid crimes and was unable to compete at this year's Olympia. Without further ado, let's hop into it. Starting at 7th place, obviously, you can see him right here, is Cedric the One McMillan. Louis Marco used to call him Cedric Aesthetic McMillan for obvious reasons. Wonderful bodybuilder, incredible shape, some really phenomenal poses. Obviously, he has some flaws. He typically has a pretty soft glute hamstring tie-in from the side, not the best separation towards the upper thigh and hip region, but some amazing arms, shoulders, chest, midsection, quads, hamstrings. And it's no secret that his shape is out of this world. He's one of the closest things we have today to modern day Lee Haney in that regard. He's tall. He's actually taller than Lee Haney was. He's wide. He has a very narrow waist compared to his insanely broad shoulders. Huge flaring quads, great chest, wide lats, big boulder shoulders, amazing arms. Everything just flows really well. But he's consistently had a problem with peaking, even when he's shown up what we think was really good for Cedric, like at this year's 2019 Arnold Australia, where I actually thought he deserved to beat William Bonac to a degree. It would have been really close either way, in my opinion. So I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the judges' vote, but he looked really good, and it could have gone to him for sure. But he isn't always that good, and even there, he wasn't perfectly peeled. Like, we've never actually seen him perfectly peeled. And a pretty good Cedric was able to really push a pretty good William Bonac. So that's saying something. And he has some really amazing shots. His rear lat spread is truly underrated. One of the best in the business right now today. I just think that, if I'm a betting man and here making predictions lists, obviously I am, I'm going to have to say that he's going to more than likely wind up at 7th. Averaging out the different possibilities. If he came in really on, he could be as high as 3rd. Maybe even winning it, but that's a stretch. And if he came in really off, he could be as low as 10th. But I think, it's the most likely situation that he's going to be in 7th. Or rather, battling for the 6th place spot with the same guy that he fought it out at the Arnold, Ohio with, Luke Sando, who I am predicting is going to wind up in that 6th place position. It's no secret that Luke Sando is by far the breakout star of this year, 2019. He finally figured out the conditioning, and he was a lot more muscular this year than he has been in years past. We can even draw some similarities between him and one of the greatest Mr. Olympias of all time, and Dorian Yates, and not just from their nationalities, but also from their intense, highly gruesome training styles, the dense muscularity that Luke has. Luke just needs to bring up some muscle maturity, bring up certain flaws like his chest, specifically the lower chest portion and the peak to his biceps, really just the size and fullness to his biceps overall, and shore up the muscle maturity around. But he's a guy who I think can definitely become a future Mr. Olympia. If he can continue to improve on the way that he's going, then he could be a reigning Mr. Olympia, even 6th time, just like Dorian Yates. He's got one of the best backs out there, at least in the back lat spread. His back double needs a little bit more detail, in my opinion. He's got one of the best front double biceps in the show right now. Even with having fairly weak biceps, the flow of his physique is incredible, not to mention the insane size that he's sporting. I think overall he's really in the running for a 6th place, even maybe a 5th place position. He himself said, when asked at the press conference last night, could he be Mr. Olympia? He said emphatically, yes! This year, maybe. Maybe not. Next up, we got in fifth place, I'm going to predict Hadi Choopan. This guy burst onto the scene in the open division. He's been talked about, as everybody knows, for a long time, but in the conversation for the 212 division, now he's coming into the open, and he came into the Toronto Pro guns a-blazing. He looked incredible. He's always looked absolutely incredible. I actually thought specifically his quads have looked better in years past, like at this show, this San Marino Pro here, which he actually did lose that show to Cedric McMillan. So there is a chance for things to be flipped around. You know, this prediction isn't set in stone. For all we know, it could be Hadi Choopan in seventh and Cedric in fifth, or something even crazier than that. But if I'm a betting man, which, like I said earlier, I am, I'm going to put Hadi Choopan in fifth. He looks insane from the front, absolutely out of this world from the side. And while he's not without his flaws, certainly his middle back, especially in the back double, could use some more detail, some drying up. His triceps are really flat, especially by comparison to his biceps, his shoulders, and his chest. His forearms a little bit spindly, and his calves, while phenomenal, are still slightly outdone by his legs. But most of his poses are absolutely incredible, and he's been getting better in years past. This is from that San Marino Pro where he did lose to Cedric McMillan, taking second place to a, kind of on, kind of off Cedric. For Cedric, it was, kind of on, but we've seen him better. So that just goes to show that Hadi Choopan, he might come in ripped, win the show, or be totally outsized by everyone, take 10th. This year is really wide open for any kind of thing to happen. Next up in fourth place, I'm going to have William Bonac. In years past, I've been a huge fan of him, and if this Olympia were happening last year, I would be saying he'd win. Even at last year's Olympia, I felt that he was the only one who could stand up against Phil Heath in the back double bicep, and was even potentially winning in some cases. And he fought a really close battle in this year's Arnold Classic against a really incredible Brandon Curry. And in my opinion, especially off of the finals, William actually might should have won. And I know it was a really, really close contest at that. However, William, he's never had the best symmetry and flow and lines, and his midsection has only been getting stockier lately. His hands clasped most muscular used to be one of his best, show-stopping poses, but now it's just too lower body dominant and shows too much width through the hips and the thighs and the arms and too much narrowness through the shoulders. I think his complete muscularity is going to be enough to land him in that top four and not move down any, but I think his lack of flow is going to keep him from moving up in today's lineup. Now, if he came in looking like this here when he won the 2018 Arnold, he could be Mr. Olympia this year. But that would mean slightly downsizing the legs, really bringing the waist down, and honing in on that conditioning. Now, I did see him at the press conference, and while he didn't have Neil Hill coaching him, which would normally be a red flag for his placement for sure, his face actually looked more sunken and more lean. He had more of that death face than I've seen him ever. Even in the 2016 and 2017 Olympias when he was probably at his best, or at the 2018 Arnold where he was also probably at his best. So we could see some kind of an upset where he does come in the best we've ever seen him and wins the Olympia. Who knows? But right now, I've got him in a solid fourth place spot. Like I said, he's got some great shots, but if he can't fix that upper body to lower body balance, then he's going to have a problem with cracking up higher into that top four. The midsection just a little bit too wide and stocky, especially with standards like Brandon Curry and Rolly Winkler coming in with their absurd X frames that are just going to blow him out of the water. Next up, speaking of the beast, in third place I've got Rolly Winkler. Now I know there's going to be a lot of fans out there that are going to go, no, he's going to win it. I don't see it, guys. He's great, don't get me wrong. And even after a really poor performance at these last Arnold Classics this last year, I can see him, really honing in on conditioning and bringing that package in. He even pretty much hit a vacuum at the Arnold Australia, although he did come in flat very flat trying to achieve that, and as such lost a lot of detail. So he still didn't place all of that well, but I think he's going to do a lot better this year and repeat his third place finish. Like I said, he was pretty soft at the Arnold's, and I think that's something he's going to be able to fix. Something I don't think he's going to be able to fix is his lower and middle back problems. That is always going to plague him and keep him from placing much higher against more complete competitors. And honestly, even at last year's Olympia, I wasn't impressed with him until finals. This year is a photo of him from prejudging, and you can see he's holding a lot of water through the legs, and everything throughout his entire body is just murky. If you cut this out and made a silhouette of it, it would be the perfect front double bicep. But when you're showing the details, or rather the lack thereof, you run into some problems. Now, obviously, he still is a beast and rightly deserves his nickname. And if he can bring in some great conditioning, then I think he can easily repeat his top 3 spot, maybe even place higher, second or even first if someone comes in off. But next up, I've got Dexter Jackson, the guy who never comes in off, except that one time, last year's Olympia. But this year he's got everybody back in his corner, and he's working a lot harder because he knows that he might actually be able to win this one. He looked incredible at the Tampa Pro, and I've only seen him looking better since, in terms of his gym updates, his midsection looking even tighter. He's always been incredible, right up there in the mix, never really dropping down that much, except for maybe 2011, 2012, when he dropped down to a whopping 6th place. I don't think it was even that low. I think it was 5th place. He is consistently in the front running, and like I said, he's looking really, really good this year. His legs have come up. He's complete head to toe. The only thing he's missing is calves. His waist could be a little bit tighter, but it also could be a lot worse, and he would still be doing really well. So I think Dexter has what it takes to take that top 2 spot. He's certainly got one of, if not the most complete backs in this lineup. Head to toe, he looks incredible. Probably the best rear lat spread in the lineup today, factoring in detail, conditioning, flow, shape, symmetry, lines everywhere. Like I said in the previous video, it looks like a starburst, not the candy, but you get what I mean. From his lower back through the striations, through his lower lats, down through the glutes and the hamstrings and the quads. It's like it starts here and just flares out. His lines are incredible, not to mention his insane trap development. Just a phenomenal rear lat spread, and his back double is no slouch either. So he's going to be a force to be reckoned with countless incredible poses. His side chest, for one, his rear lat spread, his rear double bicep. His side tricep is pretty piss poor, but his front double is getting better since last year, and his front lat spread is even starting to be pretty commendable, with his back getting just insanely huge. But all that aside, I think there is one guy who's going to be able to beat him out, and you all knew it was coming. Brandon Curry. This guy, it's no secret, everyone thinks he's going to win. Without Phil Heath, without Sean Roden, and with what we've been seeing from his updates from the gym, he is insane. And a lot of people really dock him for the legs, but really it's more a matter of his quad insertions are just a little bit high to have this kind of Bonac-esque meat down by the knee. His hamstrings are huge and hang. They're also just a little bit short to reach all the way to the knee. But I don't think that's much of a problem when you can bring this much vascularity, dryness, and dare I say graininess to the lower body. All he really needs is a little bit more fullness to the lower quads and to the glutes, and a little bit more detail to the upper body, which he seems to be bringing. I said earlier that Cedric McMillan is one of the closest things we have to Lee Haney today, and I'll say now that Brandon Curry is the other closest thing we have to Lee Haney today. With his insane V-taper, insane lat development, great chest, tiny waist, detailed quads, and great back. He's Lee Haney minus a vacuum plus a bunch of size. He's lighter than Lee Haney was. I think he's also shorter, so maybe if you put them next to each other, Lee Haney might come out on top. Maybe that's a stretch. It would have to be that 91 version where he came in at 252. Actually, I was watching the pre-show interview that Muscular Development magazine was doing with Brandon Curry and Abdullah, his trainer, and they said that this morning he weighed in at 253, so he's finally caught up to Lee Haney on weight. So we're looking at obviously this year's Mr. Olympia, in my opinion. If he comes in looking like this, just a little bit drier, I think we've got someone who's phenomenal. And until Luke Sando can bring out the maturity and become the Dorian Yates to replace the proverbial Lee Haney, I think Brandon Curry is going to be your reigning Mr. Olympia for a good long time. Even if and when Sean Roden comes back to quote unquote reclaim his title, he simply won't have the completeness to stand up next to Brandon Curry from the back, from the front, from the side. Brandon will have it. The only thing Sean will have on Brandon is maybe the quads, and that's maybe. So there you have it, guys. That's my top 7 prediction list. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. Who you think is going to win? Where you think these guys are going to place? And if you disagree, let me know. If you agree, let me know. If you like the video, leave a thumbs up. And go ahead and subscribe for more videos. I'll be doing my best to cover this year's Mr. Olympia this whole weekend. I do work in house school, so I'll see what I can do. But subscribe if you want to keep seeing my commentary on this year's Olympia. Y'all have a good one.